My name is Jennifer Johnson. I'm a peer support with Recovery Revolution, and I'm contracted in Wilkes Hospital as a peer support. I am so blessed to be partnered with this beautiful person beside me. I watch her show up for our peers every day, going above and beyond for them. She has the most beautiful heart and impacts everyone who meets her. To know her is to love her. I'd like to introduce my friend, my hospital partner, Brooke Stanley.
Already trying. I think I am going to just sit here, if that's okay, with everybody. Make it a little bit less nerve-wracking. But I wore this shirt today because in case you didn't know, you matter. And if you want to know why, you'll have to read the back of it, okay? Every one of you. Because if you're like me, there's a time that I felt like I didn't matter. There's been a lot of times that I felt like I didn't matter. I've actually shared my story countless times. And I shared it so many times that it became second nature to me. But I was telling it in a different capacity, or with a lot of years of recovery behind me, a lot of stability behind me. And this is different. This is a different story. This is a story of coming back from something you think that you can't come back from. It's a story of learning how to reintegrate yourself into something you feel called to do, which is the work that I do. Everybody that's here that does this work knows that calling and knows how hard we have to work to get to the place to where we are certified and are licensed to do it. But, you know, I made a lot of choices that I could have lost those privileges. And so I had to take some time away and take a step back and work on myself. And that was hard because that required taking a deep look at myself and a deep look at how someone, that being me, can lose 13 years of recovery. We hear about people that have 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years, however many long years, even a year. I mean, and we celebrate it. I mean, it's a huge deal. I mean, to someone that has 30 days, that's a huge deal. And I come across people all the time, as does Jen in the hospital, and I know the staff here are 3, that, you know, have relapsed after those 30, 60, 1 year after that time, and it's so defeating, and you feel like, I've done screwed it up. What's the point? And I don't know if the longer you have, the harder it hits. But after losing 13 years of not just sobriety, but of the life I had built in those 13 years, of the person that I had become in the community, to my family, to my children, losing that, and for a long time not even knowing how I lost it, was really difficult. But it's been a reminder to me that this disease that I have, that many of us in this room have, addiction, substance use disorder, that there is no cure for it. That it is something that we will have for the rest of our lives. And that sounds really cruel. And it is cruel. And I didn't sign up for it. I don't know if anybody else in here did. But if there was a sign-up sheet, I don't remember signing it. Because I remember a time back in my youth when I could party and it was innocent and fun. But that first pain pill, that innocence and fun was lost. Because that pain pill owned my soul for many, many years. And that's where my addiction began. And during that time in my life, I was arrogant, thinking that because it was a pain pill, and guys, this was back in the day, this is going to show my age. This was back in the day that when you said pain pill, it was a real pain pill. It wasn't that somebody had made in your garage. Like, it came out of somebody's prescription bottle. And this is when Oxycontin had hit. And everybody was, getting Oxycontin and oxycodones. And it was easy for people, especially on, limited incomes, to use those as a way to supplement their income, so that they were available. And if I told you how cheap they were back in the day, you wouldn't believe me. And again, that would show my age. But that pill, that teeny tiny pill, I wondered for a long time after it had me, how something so small could be so powerful, and how it could have such a hold on me. But it did. It owned my soul. There were many trips to psych wards and rehabs, some willingly, some against my will. And I do remember that arrogance kicking in again, sitting around thinking, well, this guy's talking about pawning his mom's TV, and, I have a home, and, my parents, they raised me pretty well, and I don't fit this mold, or I don't seem to be like what this stereotype of addiction is. And that was when I learned that addiction doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if you grew up on the streets. It doesn't care if your parents are doctors. It doesn't care how much money you come from or who you are. And I had to realize that to even have a chance. I had to realize that I was sick as the next person sitting, as sick as the person sitting next to me. And that was hard. And shout out to Arca for letting me back in so many times. It was like a second home to me for several years of my life. I remember spending some holidays there. I remember Easter there. Shout out to my ex-husband. I remember him bringing me my Easter basket on a weekend visit. And that was hard. And I thought that if I just finally gave in and listened to what they had to say, maybe my way wasn't working, so maybe I would try another way. And I did. They talked about 90 meetings in 90 days, which seemed like I would be cussing right now if it wasn't being videotaped. But it seemed freaking crazy, right? I did the 90 meetings in 90 days. But my mind, that mind of an addict, and I believe this lie, decided that, okay, been 90 days, I went and picked up my 90 chip, everybody that loved me came to see me, and I was, I'd secretly gotten me 330s, and I was going to celebrate just by myself, because, when you're at that point, you don't want to get out with anybody else anyways, you just want to, and you don't want to share it. And I believed that lie. I believed I could do those 330s and go right back to, my recovery and go back to a meeting again the next day. Of course, it's off to the races again. And there I was. And unfortunately, my addiction continued for a very long time. And it continued, sadly, up until the point that I got pregnant with my second child, 2 boys. And fortunately, I had a husband then that, was with me, and that I can't do this while I'm pregnant. But I knew enough to know that I couldn't just stop. And so I do not recommend this. This is not anything that anybody should do. Anyone that is pregnant should seek a medical provider. I think I need to say that and discuss their options with them. But I weaned myself off with my husband's help, using a few methadone pills. And I remember the crumbs, each day, because I knew I could not have a baby and look at that baby, going through withdrawals. And for the mothers that have done that, I know how hard that was for you, and my heart aches for you, because when I look back at that time in my life, I don't know how I did what I did. And I won't lie, and I can say this because my son that's sitting here knows how much I love him. But I spent a lot of that pregnancy not fantasizing about the delivery and, the moment and, holding him, which I look forward to. But I looked forward to getting high again. And this was a pivotal part of my story when I've shared it over the years before my relapse. And so I wanted to share this part now. I arranged to have some 30s brought to me in the hospital. And again, I justified this in my mind. I knew I was going to have a C-section and was convinced that the morphine that I was on, that I could, tap every couple minutes would not be enough. I had such a high tolerance. I had to have the 30s. So as soon as my surgery was over, and finally after I was alone in my room, after having my belly cut wide open, I take that, and I remember this moment so well. It's so vivid in my mind. Taking that IV stand and going to the bathroom while this perfect, beautiful, healthy 8-pound baby with a head full of black hair laid there in this crib. And I went in the house, ordered those pills, and I came out, and it didn't feel good. The high did not relieve me. It was not what I had anticipated all those months when I fantasized about it during the pregnancy. It broke me, because at that moment I felt like I didn't deserve that baby, that I didn't deserve him, and I didn't deserve to leave the hospital with him. I had heard about medication-assisted treatment, but this was before we even had a clinic here in Wilkes. That's how, showing my age here. But I had resisted it because I'd heard everybody say, oh, you're just trading one for another, it's just a crutch. And I'd always thought, well, if people are going to say that, I might as well just keep getting high, right? But it was after having Max that I was willing to do whatever, despite what people said. I didn't care. I did it very secretly. Only my husband at the time knew. And it was quite a commitment. When I look back on it, I felt proud of myself for it, because the closest place to go was Statesville. And I had, around the same time, got a job at a nursing facility in Yadkinville. And so I remember every morning, when you're going every day in the beginning before you earn levels, which takes a long time on methadone, driving to Statesville in my beat up car, and then driving to be at work at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I did that for what seemed like forever. But I didn't look back then. It worked. And I know that there's many paths to recovery, and my path may not be yours, and that's okay. So it's not that I want to promote MAT. I want to say that it saved my life. And for a long time I thought it alone saved my life, because God couldn't be a part of that, because it was considered to be so bad. But what I later learned when I recommitted my life to Christ was that this was part of His plan for me. And He was going to do some really amazing things through this path. I later ended up, I can't recall if it was transfer or how it, the details, but we got a clinic here. And so I was at the clinic here. And in that time, ended up, I had gone to college previously for psych tech, and was majoring in human services, so I knew I wanted to go in that field. And so I got a really good job at a local agency that's a wonderful service to this county, Wilkes Pregnancy Care Center. And was able to use my story and, what had helped me in my path and my journey to help a lot of other people that were fighting, giving in to their own desire to try MAT because nothing else had worked. And, shout out to the people that rehab worked for. And it does work. It just didn't work for me. The physical addiction and cravings were just more powerful than what I could handle. Being sick was more than I could live through. And if I hear any medical professional call it flu-like symptoms, I want to punch them, okay? Because we all know that's not flu-like symptoms. That's, I'm not going to live through these symptoms. But in that time, I achieved those 13 years of sobriety. In that time, I was approached by Project Lazarus, another great organization here in this county that helps support people with opioid use disorder and other substance use disorders, to be their peer support specialist. And at the time in this county, there wasn't this. I was able to get that job at Project Lazarus that was open only because Devin had it first. Devin Lyle, that the reason that we're all here sitting in this building right now, that started this amazing organization, had just started phases. Just started, the first part. Shout out to Brandon, that's running phases now, and that's a very old dear friend of mine. That it's a reminder when you see old friends like Brandon is to me, like Jeff is to me, that we were some of the ones that made it, because we've been to a lot of funerals. Too many funerals. Anyways, during that time, I became a peer support specialist and went through the certification process and worked for Project Lazarus part-time for 4 years while I was also working at the pregnancy center full-time. And it worked out well because my oldest son was in college and any extra money helped. And I worked that schedule around my schedule at the pregnancy center. And then I was encouraged to pursue getting licensed, which at the time was called a certified substance abuse counselor. It's now a certified alcohol and drug counselor. But was encouraged to pursue that. And I started pursuing that and going through the motions to get that license. And throughout those months and years, I was given the opportunity to speak in many capacities to many audiences, some really large audiences at large conferences across the state, which was a privilege. And it was usually for the purpose of not just sharing my story, but to help end the stigma that surrounds medication-assisted treatment. I think that we've came a long way with that. We still have a ways to go. But we also have a ways to go to end the stigma around people that struggle with substance use disorders and mental health issues. And at the root of everything that I've struggled with, addiction especially, has been my mental health issues. And it was after spending 2.5 years tapering off methadone. I mean, I couldn't have done it more slowly or appropriately as they recommended than what I did. And, after that, my mental health just started declining. And I was diagnosed with post-acute withdrawal syndrome. So I was starting to experience withdrawal symptoms, enough to really trigger the mental health problems that were bubbling beneath the surface. I was had been diagnosed long before, as an adolescent actually, with obsessive compulsive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder and clinical depression. Later was diagnosed with ADHD. And I think my OCD and ADHD compete with each other to be on the forefront, which is really fun. And in my experience that I'm about to get to, I also got to join the club of being diagnosed with PTSD, because I didn't have enough mental health problems anyways, right? So I was not addressing these mental health issues and had just gotten offered a position as a counselor at the very same clinic that I was a patient at. And you talk about a full circle moment. I remember going in with the keys in the back thinking, and the door code thinking, do they really know that I have a set of keys and a door code in this place? And my goal and my hope was that there would be hope in that for others that came in and that knew that I had been a patient, that I would share with that I had been a patient, and that I was now working as a counselor, because there is hope in that. But the peer support specialist in me was still there. And it was hard because I found myself trying to be a peer support specialist and a counselor at the same time, which is not what's best for anybody. But when someone tells me that they're homeless, it's hard to just let them walk out knowing that they have nowhere to sleep that night, or that they're hungry and they don't have anything to eat. So I poured myself out, and I'm not trying to paint myself as a martyr here. I'm trying to tell you that I didn't take care of myself, whether my intentions were good or not. You can't pour from an empty cup. And I left myself empty, struggling to hold on to all that I had worked for. And in that time, I don't think I had any idea how sick I was. And this was well before the actual relapse. I was unwell. And I started seeing things differently. I started thinking differently. And in that, I made a lot of bad decisions. I made a lot of bad decisions that destroyed my family, that hurt a lot of people. That's taken a long time and a lot of work with my therapist to be able to forgive myself for. I knew that God had forgiven me already, but forgiving ourselves, that's hard, right? That's the hard part, and being able to move on from that. But before I could do that, I had to get out of this situation I was in, which my sickness only became worse by finding myself in a relationship that was very, very violent, very, very toxic and unhealthy. And for those of us that have been abused, and people wonder why you keep going back or why you stay, because we were conditioned before the abuse started to stay, because we felt like we deserved what we were getting, because I didn't deserve any better. I remember so many dark nights during this period of my life, and felt such hate towards my then ex-husband for taking Max, my son. I thank God he took him thank God for the day that came when he said it's time for him to come home. I never wanted him to be away from you. I wanted you to get well. That says a lot about him. More than I ever even knew about him in the many years we were together. But during that time, before I was able to get away, I laid, having lost everything, so homesick, and we all know that homesick feeling that we would have as children when we go somewhere and not be at home and just like in the pit of our stomachs. It was terrible. And I wasn't homesick for a place. I wasn't homesick for the home that I had lost, that had been our family home for 10 years. I was homesick for my son. I was homesick to be anywhere where I knew he was in the next bedroom. And I remember the night when I knew, even in that night, that this decision was made, that I made this for myself, that no one was going to believe me when I said I was going to get away and stay away, and nor should they, because I had escaped many times and went back. And so I knew it wasn't like I was going to, have this moment, okay, I'm done, I'm out, and suddenly everything's going to be beautiful again. It wasn't like that. I knew it was going to take a lot of time, and it was going to require, proof, which was more than fair. And in that beginning, when I escaped, I left on foot. I had a lot of dogs, and I most of the dogs that I adopted were older or sick. I know he's probably tired of me referencing him, but when we were married, Chris would say, "You don't want a dog unless something's messed up with it," and he was right. Those were the dogs that speak to my heart still yet. But I was down to one that was still alive, and her name was Sammy. And I left on foot carrying Sammy, and what bags I could carry on my shoulders. And I walked. The closest place I could walk to was the fire department in Windy Gap, off the Windy Gap exit. And I called the only person that at that time I felt like he always answers the phone. And I had not been in contact with him, but that I felt like would answer, and that was my daddy. And I knew it was going to be hard when I called him, let me tell you. I wasn't signing up for no easy go of it. I was signing up to go to boot camp. It was not going to be easy, it wasn't. I was lucky he let me take my dog with him, but that was my only condition I felt like I could, hold on to was I'll go, do whatever you say. But Sammy's got to come too. So he came and got me. Boy, I got an earful. And I stayed at my dad's. And he loves me, but he wasn't much for my company. And was, pretty displeased with my decisions. And, it was then that I had to start really reflecting. I actually, ironically, was being accused of having relapsed long before I actually had used a drug. But, truthfully, they were right. I had relapsed long before I had used a drug. And I kept holding out, again, with some arrogance, that I have not done any drugs yet. So these accusations, I was just, how dare they? Who do they think they are? And then, eventually, because the relapse hadn't happened months before I used that first drug, I used again. And then there was the reality of 13 years of recovery. That at that time, I felt like we're gone. Gone. And there were a lot of people that wrote me off. I co-founded a nonprofit in that time. Made a home, made a life, done so many great things in that time. And a lot of the people and entities that, were so proud to have me and were proud to say, oh, this is Brooke, and, she struggled with addiction, and she has, all this recovery, and, they loved that story. And they loved it when the newspaper wrote about me and it was on the front page, and when this attention was coming, it was great. I was so cool. I was that token friend, it was cool to have that friend. But I became uncool to be their friend really fast. And it's in those times, and I know a lot of people in here can relate, that we find out who really loves us, and we find out about people's characters. And did I, make some bad choices and do some bad things during this relapse? Of course. But ironically, a lot of the friends I lost were because I was in a relationship that was, domestically violent. If that's the right verbiage, that was violent. Because it's hard to understand why, like I said, someone keeps going back. But I was sick. I was already, I don't like to use this word, and I don't ever use it in the capacity of when I'm working with someone, but I'll use it on myself. I was crazy. And the drug that I primarily relapsed on was one that I never would have sought out or wanted. I was a downers girl, but this drug just made me crazier. I had just no sense of reality. I mean, I'm not crazy if I skip a night of sleep, but this was, like a nightmare that I couldn't get away from. And so I felt alone, and I felt hopeless. So getting out was hard. Making that decision to call my daddy was hard. But I had a little boy who was growing up so fast. And I could not live with losing any more time with him. It's not that I didn't get to see him during that year, but I needed him home. So I spent that time at my daddy's, aka boot camp, and done what I needed to. And at that time, I was carless and jobless, essentially homeless, because I was staying with my dad, who, would tell you if he was here today, he was ready for me to go on. And as we all know, I think most of us probably finding a place to rent right now in this county is near impossible. But one of the few people that had not turned on me, that had reached out to let me know, if you need me, I'm here, didn't push themselves on me, was Jeff Walker. We all know here from Recovery Revolution. And because I remembered that, it gave me hope that I wouldn't be alone, that there was somebody, that Devin and Jeff had not given up on me or wrote me off. And when you're jobless, carless, and homeless, where do you start? How do you get to a job when you don't have a car? How do you get a car if you don't have a job to pay for it? And then how do you get a home? And I know that there's a lot of people sitting in this room that have been in that position. And I had never been that low before. And I never thought that I would be left to be that low. But I needed to be left to be that low. It was humbling. my daddy let me borrow the money for not a car that I would have chose to drive. Again, humbling, but I was so grateful for it. For me to find a job that I did not want to work, that again I wouldn't have chosen, but that I was grateful for. And with that car and that job, I called Jeff Walker and Devin. I need to get an apartment right away. I need a place right now. I need to get home. I need to get back to Max. And they connected me with somebody in the community that's a great landlord that has nice properties, and he had one that was available, an apartment. It's actually like a house. He remodeled into 2 apartments, and I went to look at it, and he probably had hundreds of applications, and there's credit checks and all that stuff, and I was probably so far down on the list in reality of who would have been chosen. But because I had somebody that spoke up for me, that said, yeah, she's got some issues, she's had some struggles, but she is a super, super clean freak and is going to keep your house really well cared for. And, Kara, I should have heard like a shout out on that part. Yeah. Kara, my best friend that's back there, is another, I don't know if it's ironic, but like when I think about Brandon and Jeff, I think about Kara, who I've been through so much with as well. And for us to be working here together, as during my relapse, she was also struggling, and we spent a lot of time together and done a lot of stupid stuff that we thought were smart. I was going to be her lawyer and represent her, and it sounded. We planned this out in my kitchen. It sounded like a good idea at the time, right? And so that speaks to our mind. But even during that time when she got keys on my couch, I was very upset with her, and had to make her only eat in the kitchen. So she'll tell you. No, Kara's very clean. Don't get me wrong.
I fell asleep eating a cookie.
In her defense, but anyways, they noted the good points about me, and I got this apartment. And I called Chris and told him I had a place, and said, "Come get your boy." He didn't have to do that. But was my boy ready to come home? He was. We all are going to brag on our kids. But you wouldn't know it from today if I've introduced you to him because, well, he's just turned 18. So, kind of honoring, but he was proud of me. I didn't say it, but I knew it. And the only people in the world, because I wasn't going to burden Jeff and Devin with this, was Max and 3 of his friends. 3 or 4 ninth graders total. That's who went to my storage building and unloaded every item I owned and packed it into a U-Haul that Hope Ministries so graciously paid for. And those kids, along with my son and his buddies, those kids moved us into our new apartment, which became home to us in every way that matters. Not long after that, I went to a ball game to watch Max play, and Jeff was there, and was sitting pretty close to him, and we were just talking, and he leaned over and he said, "Hey, you come work for us. You'll know when you're ready. Give me a call." And this was a long ways away from me being ready or me having enough time of recovery and stability. But do you know what him saying that did to me? What that offered me? It gave me hope that I could go back to what I felt led to do, to what my heart's desire was, to help others struggling with this disease, with mental afflictions that I've battled my whole life. And so I worked that job, that same job I got at my dad's that I hated. Oh, it sucked, y'all. It sucked. And the pay sucked. And the environment sucked. But I just kept showing up. And I just kept coming home. Because I knew that I was going to be in a bedroom down the hall from where my son laid. And that homesick feeling was no more. And that was really all that mattered. The time passed. I was, and this is important to know, I was doing intensive therapy, multiple different types of counseling. Was seeing a doctor that specialized in mental health medicine management, so I was getting on the right meds, getting regulated, which was, what I needed all along, was to address some of those underlying issues. And of course that's, when I found out about, the PTSD that I had, and understandably so. And so, that was a lot to work through too. But I did. Still am a little bit, but I did. And the time came when it hit me one day. I'm ready to make that call. I always knew I wanted to do it with integrity, that I wanted to have the sobriety that I needed, and that I wanted to have the mental wellness that I needed. Because when we work in this field, it's dangerous for us to be unwell trying to help somebody else that is unwell. So I was going to make that call, and I felt confident because I didn't feel like this person would ever lie to me. But there was always that idea of maybe there's nothing available right now, and maybe something that will happen down the road. So I wasn't prepared for what happened. God happened. And I don't know why I keep being surprised by God. Because His mercy and His grace is, and I can speak on this because it's my story. And I know that that's not everybody's story, but for me, my God, my addiction and my mental health problems, it was all so much bigger than me, but it was never bigger than my God. So, sure enough, as God's plan was, that I didn't know and couldn't have imagined, because His plans for us are always greater than what we could have planned or imagined for ourselves. Just that, as a matter of fact, we have gotten this contract with Atrium Health over, and we're getting some peers over in the ER primarily. We're trying to build this program up. They really need somebody, third shift on the weekends. And it was this kind of crazy schedule because it was going to be working Friday night until Monday morning, 40 hours in that time span, which most people would be like, very unappealing. But for me, they just wanted to have as much time at home, even if it's to see her teenage son in passing, because that's what they do, they just kind of pass in and out.
But if you welcome all their friends and feed them, you'll see them in passing a lot more, and they'll come a lot more. So you just have to like let all their friends come too. Yeah, so that's worked out well for me. But I took that job, and I thought back to when I first finished high school and thought I wanted to be a nurse, and that didn't work out for me. But I always knew that I wanted to be in a hospital. I wanted to be like in that setting, but I never thought. I just let it go because I thought I didn't fit. What do you know? God found a place for me right at the time that I needed it and that they needed it. And I started working there, and I went into it with, there's going to be a lot of challenges. The hospital staff, this is going to be new to them, having someone there. So it's kind of like, even where are you going to sit? Where are you going to place yourself? You don't want to be in the way, but you want them to know you're there. You've got to build their trust, because you're working underneath them, and they're not going to want to send you into rooms if they don't feel like you know what you're doing. So you have to not only be able to work with peers and let them know that they are your peer, they're your equal, they're your friend. There's someone that has the same struggles that you've had and have. But then you also have to flip the switch and go behind that nurse's station and interact with doctors and PAs and nurses and pretend like you're smart enough to be there, okay? And build those relationships. And I remember the first doctor, I have to shout him out, Dr. Bennett in the ER, that really gave me the chance to shine and utilize me. And I literally saw other doctors kind of, see this. And so it opened doors. It opened more doors. And the next thing you know, this thing is wide open. And I felt so blessed and so privileged. And I remember not far into it, maybe a few months, I came home. And Max had a gift for me. And our teenagers, they don't usually do that kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Most of them. And it's like, what's this for? And as I'm opening it, and if anybody bet against me crying, I'm sorry for the money you lost, okay? As I open it, I see that it's limited edition vinyl that Eminem had put out for the anniversary of the Slim Shady LP. That was very expensive, especially for a teen. And something I would have never bought for myself. That, oh my gosh. I mean, oh my gosh. It's Eminem, y'all, okay? I know I'm old, but it's Eminem. And I said, what's this for? He said, because I'm proud of you. And anybody that is fighting today, anybody that watches this that's fighting, I don't know who it'll be or what it'll look like that's going to say something to you, that's going to be the moment that makes you realize that all the hell you've been through, the fight that you have fought, the judgment, the gossip, that you got through it all, you kept pushing, and that it was worth it. But that moment will come, and I don't know what that will look like for you. But for me, it looked like an Eminem vinyl. And a teenage son that was proud of me. Because if nobody else in this world is proud of me, I want it to be him. He's going to be so pissed when we leave here. then I had an ex-husband who became a friend that has co-parented with me so beautifully. And we were able to, I don't want to say finish, because he's going to leave for college in the fall. And so even though he just turned 18, I'm telling myself I'm not done parenting. I'm never going to be done parenting. But, you know, I'm still really mom while he's in college, you know. I'm going to be super involved. So I did it. And I did it today. I woke up today and said that I'm going to not use, that I'm going to take my mental health meds. I'm going to apply what I've learned in therapy. I'm going to continue in therapy. I'm going to continue setting healthy boundaries. So for everybody that calls me during the day and my phone's on silent and you're pissed and think that's bad, I'm sorry. This girl's got to sleep. And this girl knows that if something's wrong with her son during the day, his daddy's going to answer that phone every time. So I got it worked out. And something really cool that I realized in all of this. You know, those 13 years, I didn't lose those, y'all. Nobody can take that from me. I still have those years. Did I fall down? Yeah, I fell down hard. But I got back up. And you can too. And I pray every day if I fall again, that I'll get back up. That I have to make a conscious decision every day when I wake up that I'm not going to use today, that I'm not going to go around the people, places, and things that trigger me. And in the moments that I make any kind of slightly bad decision, it doesn't take me very long at all to quickly realize, nope, not today, Satan. Because my God is greater. And if I will just lean on Him for strength, I'll be okay. And I'll get through it. And I'm going to keep fighting this fight. And God willing, I stay this well, this strong. I'm going to keep fighting for those that can't fight for themselves. I'm going to be a voice for the voiceless. And you may have noticed my quote that was on the advertisement for this Voices of Recovery, which was, I'm recovering loudly to keep others from dying quietly. Because I'm tired of going to funerals. And I'm tired of people holding their head down because they don't feel like they're worth, they have any worth. They're worth being fought for, that they're worthy of love, that they're worthy of forgiveness. Because we all are, no matter what we've done. It could be much worse than me. It could be not nearly as bad as me. But we do recover. Thank y'all.